As a preliminary matter, I'm Peter Halley, Chair of the Advisory Committee of Non-Voting Taxpayers. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. I take it everybody can hear. And let's see. When I call your name, please respond in the affirmative, but we can go. We know we have a quorum, and the secretary has the information for the quorum. That's good. This open meeting is being conducted remotely, consistent with Massachusetts law, and in order to mitigate, we're having these meetings to mitigate the transmission of COVID-19 virus. We've actually suggested that these sorts of meetings be the norm rather than emergency type meetings in the future, as it makes it quite a bit easier to meet, especially for committees like our own. You can find the agenda is posted, and I hope each one of you has an agenda, and the minutes of the last meeting also posted, and I hope you've been able to review those. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the ACNVT is convening by video via the Zoom app that is posted on the town's website, and that identifies how the public may join, and this meeting was noticed in accordance with the public meeting law. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by this recording. All supporting materials and references to supporting materials have been provided to members of this body and are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. Basic ground rules of the meeting. We'll turn to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some of the ground rules. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I'll go down the line of members, inviting each to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called or until you're recognized. Please remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until I yield the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through me, taking care to identify yourself. After members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged and speak through the chair. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Typically, we have a show of hands and record who what the will of this group is. So let's move to the agenda. First off, we have a quorum, and do I have a motion to approve this agenda for today's meeting?
So moved.
And a second? Second, please.
I'll second.
Second. All those in favor, raise your right hand or left hand, any hand that works. Yeah, that seems to be a unanimous. Then let's just go to the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the proposed minutes for the last meeting?
So moved.
Second? speak up. There's so many faces on the screen, I can't keep track of everybody. Second, okay. Bill, second. All those in favor? Okay. Anybody opposed? No, that passes. Okay. So I think we'll start with Gail Sullivan and the discussion of the outdoor lighting bylaw. That is ATM warrant 76. And when we're finished with that, we'll go to Article 72 and Bruce Mandel, motorized passenger devices bylaw. And then our favorite topic, the STR issues. So Gail, would you see where is Gail? There's Gail. Okay, and on my screen, you're over here. Thank you.
In the dark. She's in the dark.
Well, if you would sort of tell us, we have a general understanding what this is about, but if you would give us the pitch for why this should pass the town meeting, that I think probably is the way to approach it.
Okay, well, thank you, Peter. Actually, my name is Gail Walker. The agenda had
I'm sorry.
a mistake. No problem. No problem. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today about my article. My proposal, to put it simply, is to replace the existing outdoor lighting bylaw with a new and improved bylaw that's consistent with current best practices for outdoor lighting and that has stronger enforcement provisions. The goal is to minimize harm from light pollution, reduce energy consumption, and preserve the historic character of the island, all while still allowing for adequate lighting for outdoor activities, safety, and security. So hopefully you've all had a chance to read the bylaw, or at least the summary of it. But what I thought might be helpful today would be to actually briefly walk you through it and kind of explain the reasons behind some of the technical requirements, point out what I think are some of the most significant changes from the existing bylaw, and then discuss upfront some topics that I think are probably on everybody's mind because they've come up in other presentations. And then after that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. If it'd be okay to screen share.
Yes.
I'm not going to do a PowerPoint presentation, but there's just something I want to help guide the discussion. Can everybody see that?
That'd be helpful. Yep.
You can see the it's basically a table of contents that's not part of the warrant article, but it provides an easy reference for the different provisions, and it's going to guide my discussion today. I'll start basically with the I'm so sorry, I'm still recovering from a cold. Let's just start with the general requirements. You can see that there are 4 of them. And these basically reflect the fundamental principles of responsible outdoor lighting that have been agreed upon by the International Dark Sky Association and the Illuminating Engineering Society, which is the society that represents lighting professionals in the lighting industry. First, for shielding, lighting above 600 lumens would have to be what's called fully shielded. And that means that no light can be emitted above the horizontal plane from where the light is emitted. That is to minimize the amount of light that goes up into the sky, as well as the amount of light that creates unsafe glare and shines onto the property of others, adversely affecting their right and ability to enjoy their own property. There are lots of fixtures commercially available now that would meet that requirement. The ubiquitous onion light, which by design is not fully shielded, could still be used. You would just have to use a bulb that is 1600 lumens or less. And according to the experts I've spoken with, that's adequate for lighting an entrance and porch and steps. Second, as you can see, correlated color temperature would be regulated, which is not currently regulated by the existing bylaw. The color temperature would have to be 2700 Kelvin or lower, unless that isn't commercially available. This is to minimize the emission of blue light that's been found to be so harmful, that has been found to adversely affect their circadian rhythms of basically every living thing that's been studied. The International Dark Sky Association now recommends 2200 Kelvin or lower for most outdoor lighting applications. But that's kind of aspirational because their fixtures and bulbs aren't yet readily available for all lighting applications at that level. So 2700 Kelvin is available now, quite common. So that's the color temperature I incorporated for the bylaw. And that's the color temperature that the Massachusetts Medical Society recently decided to advocate for all outdoor lighting. The third requirement has to do with brightness, and there are specified limits on brightness. This is a new or different approach from the existing bylaw, which is based on measurements called foot candles. Measuring foot candles requires a special light meter that's kind of tricky to use and kind of expensive, whereas lumen output is generally included in product specifications. Many still gauge brightness by wattage. Wattage is actually how much energy a bulb uses. And now that there are more energy efficient alternatives to incandescent bulbs, wattage is no longer an accurate way to gauge brightness. A 9-watt LED could be as bright as a 60-watt incandescent bulb. So the best way now to judge brightness of a fixture or bulb is based on its lumen output. That is the measurement of the amount of light that the fixture emits. The higher the lumen level, the brighter the light. So lumen limits are what is used in the current bylaw instead of foot candles. Finally, there would be restrictions on the hours during which outdoor lighting could be on, with some exceptions, most notably for safety and security. The existing bylaw has a curfew, but it's been interpreted as only applying to sports lighting used for competitions on non-residential properties. Now, beyond the general requirements, you get into some specific requirements for specific applications. And those, most notably, as you can see listed, string lights. There'd be special requirements for string lights, landscape lighting, holiday lighting, flag lighting, sign lighting, non-residential sports lighting, street lights, and public lighting. Then you get to the prohibition section. And the main thing to note about that, is that light trespass and glare, light trespass and glare that rises to the level of public safety hazard or a public nuisance would be prohibited. And that means that this kind of lighting would have to be abated regardless of the grace period, which I'll get to in a minute. And that means the property owner might have to take actions beyond what's otherwise required to eliminate the public hazard or nuisance. Then there are a certain number of exemptions. The most notable, I think, for your purposes and most property owners is there's an exemption for temporary lighting required to save life, limb, or property from imminent peril, which would include security lighting controlled by a motion sensor and is on for just a short time. The applicability section, which is actually at the beginning, but I held it to the end because it just in terms of talking, it seemed more logical to talk about it now. Lighting installed before the new regulations become effective could be used for 5 years with a possible extension up to 10 years in some circumstances. And the big exception to this grace period, as I just mentioned it before, is for lighting that constitutes a public safety hazard or lighting nuisance. That would have to be abated within 30 days of notification. And then there's a provision for administrative waivers. If compliance with the new regulations would constitute an unreasonable hardship or be detrimental to health, safety, or welfare, an administrative waiver could be sought. Turning to enforcement, which I think is one of the most important parts of the proposed bylaw, it has a number of new provisions meant to improve enforcement, which is an issue with the existing bylaw. First, it would create a duty to investigate by the lighting enforcement officer. That is an existing position, but right now there is nothing in the bylaw that says he actually has to investigate when somebody complains. So this bylaw creates such a duty, and would require more transparency about any enforcement action taken or the reason enforcement action was not taken. It would also create appeal rights for those who want to challenge the inaction or enforcement decision of the lighting enforcement officer. It would add step up civil penalties to provide more financial incentive to comply. Right now, it's just $100 per violation. My proposal is to make it $100 for the first violation, $200 for the second violation, and $300 for the third and subsequent violations. And perhaps most importantly, it would add an outdoor lighting permit requirement so that outdoor lighting plans are reviewed for compliance before the lighting is installed. This would apply to any construction project that requires a building permit and or review by the HDC. Many people think that outdoor lighting plans are reviewed as part of the building permit process, but that's not true because the outdoor lighting regulations are not part of the zoning bylaw. Now for the biggest changes, I can stop sharing now, I think. For the biggest changes from the existing bylaw, it's hard to limit these to just a few since there's so many changes, and I think all are important for reducing light pollution. But here's what I would say are the top 10. One, there are clear rules about uplighting and shielding. The current bylaw has some internal inconsistencies about that. Two, color temperature would now be regulated. 3, there would be a general curfew instead of just one for non-residential sports competitions. 4, there would be a better approach for regulating brightness. That's referring to the lumen limits instead of foot candles. There would be better regs for non-residential sports lighting, and that's because I've received so many complaints about the athletic lighting at the Nantucket Public Schools complex. There would be better better regulation for street lights, which can become big contributors of light pollution if they don't meet certain requirements or criteria when they're converted to LED, which is really just a matter of time. Number 7, illumination of signs would now be regulated. It isn't currently. Well, it does fall within the sign guidelines of the HDC, but it's not regulated as part of the existing bylaw. Number 8, flagpoles higher than 20 feet would now have to be lit from above instead of with ground mounted spotlights. The typical flagpole on a residential property is under 20 feet. So this is really meant to apply to flagpoles owned by non-residential properties, and one comes to mind is the Sconset Rotary has one that is now lit from below. Let's see, number 9, there would be the stronger enforcement provisions I mentioned, and number 10, there would be the availability of a waiver and an extension of the grace period based on hardship, which was not included in the existing bylaw. So that's a high-level summary of my proposal. Let me now address a few things that have come up in other settings that I suspect are on your mind. First, a common question is, well, what about safety and security? That's a common objection to outdoor lighting regulations in general, because a lot of people feel that more light is needed to avoid bodily harm and to keep properties secure. But here's why nothing about the proposed bylaw will compromise safety and security. First, a property owner could still follow the illuminance levels recommended by the Illuminating Engineering Society. There's nothing in the proposed bylaw that would make them go lower than those levels. 2, the restriction on hours of illumination would not apply to streetlights. Safety and security lighting could be on all night on residential properties without restriction. For non-residential properties, safety and security lighting could be on until 1 hour after closing of the business or operations, and after that it could still be on as long as it was dimmed to at least 50% when activity wasn't detected. There would be a general exemption for temporary lighting required to save life, limb, or property from imminent peril, which I mentioned before, and this would cover lighting that's turned on for a short period for safety and security purposes. And finally, as mentioned before, if any property owner felt that any of the restrictions would be detrimental to safety and security, given their particular circumstances, they could request an administrative waiver. So I've really tried hard to strike the right balance between concerns about safety and security and the harm from excessive artificial light at night. Next, some people say, well, what about the burden and expense for private property owners? First, in most cases, just changing a bulb or adding shielding would bring the lighting into compliance if it wasn't in compliance with the new regs. And if a fixture needs to be replaced, the fully shielded fixtures aren't expensive and they're readily available. Second, there's a 5-year grace period, which can be extended up to 10 years in some circumstances to give people time to prepare for the new regs if they're passed. Third, when compliance would create an unreasonable hardship, an administrative waiver could be sought, as mentioned. And to the extent anyone finds the terminology and requirements hard to understand, if the proposed bylaw passes, I'll be undertaking an educational campaign and providing resources to help people comply. I'll also be working with lighting suppliers on Nantucket to make sure they stock bulbs and fixtures that would comply with the new guidelines or new rules if they're adopted. And next, sometimes people say, is light pollution really such a problem on Nantucket that all these regulations are needed? And in a word, yes, at least on some parts of the island. Complaints about light trespass, glare, and not being able to see the stars at night are increasing all across the island. And satellite data confirms that the night sky has gotten brighter. That data shows it's about 25% brighter today than just 10 years ago. And it's actually probably even worse than that because the satellites don't pick up the blue light that's emitted by LEDs, which many people are using now, of course. To be sure, the light pollution on Nantucket isn't nearly as bad as in any other places. We're fortunate to be among the few places in the United States where the Milky Way can still be seen with the naked eye, at least in some places on the island. It's no longer true all over the island. Astonishingly, 80% of Americans can no longer see the Milky Way from where they live. But if we want to preserve our special status, we need better regulation of outdoor lighting. And a few other things to consider. Overlighting is simply a waste of energy. If light is going up into the sky and serving no purpose, that's just a waste of energy. And so many bright lights are starting to reduce the historic charm of Nantucket. And finally, there's a lot of evidence that artificial light at night is harmful to wildlife and human health. I know that some in this group have questioned the validity of the studies that have been done. I checked on those and have been assured that they were properly vetted. However, if you're not convinced about the harm to wildlife and human health, there are so many other independent reasons to support my proposal. Next, I've been asked, why can't you just educate people on what the right thing to do is and convince them to voluntarily comply rather than having a formal enforcement process? First, I think it's really important to have updated standards on the books because trying to convince people to do the right thing is really hard when the Code of Nantucket has conflicting outdated standards. I've actually been trying for a number of years to do that, and it's very hard. To have any hope of widespread voluntary compliance with what's considered best practices, these need to be reflected in the code. And second, for 17 years, ever since the existing outdoor lighting bylaw was adopted, the town has basically left it up to property owners to voluntarily comply. And that simply hasn't worked. I think we need stronger enforcement provisions, and we need to hold the town to a higher standard when it comes to enforcement. Next, why should you have confidence in what I've proposed? Indeed, I am not an expert on outdoor lighting, but I've been researching light pollution for 5 to 6 years now, first as a member of the Wisconsin Civic Association board, then on behalf of the Nantucket Civic League, and more recently as the founder of Nantucket Lights, the citizen advocacy group that's exclusively dedicated to combating light pollution on Nantucket. I've spent 3 to 4 months working with outdoor lighting experts just on drafting the proposed bylaw, and that included looking at whether the communities have done. I was a career litigator for the U.S. Department of Justice for about 15 years before I retired, and I applied the same high standards I was held to then to this. Finally, I've been coming to Nantucket for over 37 years and honestly have only its best interests at heart. Finally, how much support is there for the proposed bylaw? I'm happy to say that it has been endorsed by several island-wide organizations. The Nantucket Civic League, which has 25 members in, which has members in 25 neighborhoods around the island and rarely takes a position on warrant articles, has endorsed it. And by the way, it was the executive committee of the Civic League that urged me to undertake the challenge of drafting a new bylaw to address complaints about light pollution that they had been hearing for several years. The proposed bylaw has also been endorsed by the Nantucket Historical Commission, which agrees that light pollution is starting to erode the historic character of the island. It's also been endorsed by the boards of 2 neighborhood associations so far, the Brant Point Association and the Mattocket Conservation Association. Those boards voted to endorse it, and letters were sent to the Finance Committee. I actually expect many other neighborhood associations will follow their lead after I've had the opportunity to make presentations to their boards, which are coming up. The only notable opposition has been from town administration, which basically doesn't want to deal with implementing and enforcing the proposed regulations. Apparently feeling preserving our dark skies is an important priority. I think that's the main reason the existing bylaw hasn't been enforced, and why the lighting at some of the town-owned facilities isn't even in compliance with that. To change that attitude, the Nantucket community needs to send a clear and strong message that preserving the beauty of our dark skies is as important as other conservation and preservation efforts. The Finance Committee, which reviews all warrant articles and other votes, and votes whether or not to recommend passage of them to Nantucket voters, is still deliberating about my proposal. It discussed it at its meeting on January 26th, and we'll be discussing it again next Thursday, February 16th. I'm actually currently in the process of preparing additional materials for their consideration and written answers to some questions they have sent to me, which I'll be submitting by Wednesday. It's hard to say how they'll end up voting. My proposal is more complicated than most citizen warrant articles, and the timeline for voting on warrant articles may not be sufficient for them to come up to speed on outdoor lighting standards to the point they feel comfortable supporting it. After all, I've spent years doing it and they only have a matter of weeks, but I'm doing my best to educate them as quickly as possible with the help of the experts I've been working with. Obviously, the more groups that endorse the proposal before FinCom takes a vote, the more likely they will vote in favor of recommending passage of it to Nantucket voters. So I'm really hoping this committee will decide to join the Civic League and the Historical Commission in endorsing it. So that concludes my prepared remarks, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this point.
Thank you very much, Gail. Very fulsome and very, very helpful to understand, because as you say, it is a very dense and complicated proposal, especially when compared to the existing bylaw. But I think they both cover the same subject, and I'm sort of concerned whether the existing bylaw with a couple of tweaks, which would include an enforcement provision or mandate, would not. But I'm not going to ask that question. I'll just make a statement. And that's a question I have in my own mind, that this is so complicated that it becomes difficult.
Could I respond though, Peter? Even if
yeah,
it's not a
sure,
question,
sure.
could I respond? So I did. I mean, that was my hope in going into this, that I could just suggest line edits to the bylaw. But when I started really studying it and breaking it down, I felt that wasn't possible, because there's actually a lot of internal inconsistencies and ambiguities, and even the organization of it is very confusing. So I really felt that to have clear standards that people could voluntarily comply with and that could be enforceable, I needed to start from scratch. And so that's when I started looking at how other communities did it, and some model bylaws that were out there. And that's how I came up with what I did. There actually is a mandate to enforce in the existing bylaw. It's just not being enforced.
Yeah. We've been through this same issue 3 years ago or so with noise, because really the big component that grasps my attention is the trespass component. What you call light trespass is basically the same thing as noise trespass, which is also a physical phenomenon, but the noise is on your property, it's generated from someplace else, same thing with light. We basically got nowhere. We ended up getting a worse noise bylaw than in my view, than existed prior to that. And in part, it was because of the distaste for what I would call domestic enforcement by the town. Was the town really doesn't want to get involved in people's lives to this incredible detail if they can avoid doing it. Just let me open this up to everybody, obviously, but I think for the sake of clarity, let me put forth my own understanding of these lumens and the color temperatures. The 27K color temperature is basically the temperature that a old-fashioned incandescent bulb would have. It's a sort of a very warm white. That's number one. That's my understanding, having done a lot of interior lighting.
It's very subtle differences. I think I've read that incandescent is more like between 20, maybe 2,400, 2,500, but close. I mean, to your eye, it would probably look very similar.
Yeah. If you go to the store and look at typically most light bulbs have color temperatures on them. Typically you'll find around 2,700 and then up to 3,000, and then 4,000 would be like a very, very white industrial bulb that you'd find in a gas station or maybe even a street light and so forth. And I think this 2,700 is great, but I know when LEDs were first introduced, finding 2,700 was near to impossible. Now it's much easier, but these lower lights in this range tend to be far more expensive than lights in the sort of industrial range in general. And then in terms of the lumens, my understanding is that the 600 lumens is approximately the light you get from a 60-watt bulb.
It's actually just slightly less. It's more like if there were an incandescent bulb that was 50 watt, that would be it. But there is no such thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think in case anybody was wondering about color temperature and lumens, to put this in a frame of reference for you, we're talking about something that would be close to a standard incandescent bulb, a 60-watt bulb or slightly less. When we say 600 lumens, seems
and
like.
I'm sorry, Peter.
Yeah.
You're covering a lot. If I could just interject, I have some pictures of onion streetlights with bulbs below that would meet the 600 lumen cap. If you'd like to see them.
Yeah. No. I just wanted to get an idea, because there are all these standards in here, and I think the average person, myself included, don't really understand lumens, and so I'm trying to get some sort of reference point to start from, so it would be dimmer or brighter than a 50-watt bulb, let's say, if you're talking about 600 lumens. Okay.
And again, I would point out again, Peter, I would point out that's only if you have unshielded fixtures. There's plenty of fully shielded. And the some dark sky advocates would be, and I've actually had people contact me about, why don't you just require all fixtures to be fully shielded, and then you don't have to have that lumen, cap for unshielded. And the main reason I allowed for that is because the onion lights are so Nantucket. I mean, that the Nantucket look. So that 600 lumen only applies if it's unshielded. And then there are some exceptions to that.
Okay, so I guess the other thing, and then I'm just let everybody else ask questions. I don't understand what fully shielded versus something less than fully shielded actually means when you're looking at a light fixture.
Okay, so I wasn't going to do this, but let me see if I can pull it up. So I have, I'm preparing a PowerPoint to be presented to FinCom that sort of covers that. So if you want me to, I could pull up that slide to give you a visual. Would you like me to
Sure.
do that?
I
Okay, just give
think
me.
everybody else would find it valuable because I think we need a common basis of understanding to go further.
Okay, just give me 1 second. I wasn't planning on it, but I will pull it up. It covers other stuff too, but let me see if it's been so long since I've done a PowerPoint, but okay, so let me share this now with you. Okay, sorry, can you see that?
Yeah, yep, great.
Okay, so on the left, that's the diagram you see actually in the proposed bylaw. And fully shielded means no light can go above this plane. And that eliminates all light going up into the sky. And here's
Gotcha.
another example. On the right, that's an example of fully shielded. Here's a
Yep.
fully shielded floodlight. And I didn't put examples of what's not fully shielded, but an onion light is a good example of something that's not fully shielded because you can see the bulb. Basically,
Yep.
anything where you can see the bulb, it means it's not fully shielded.
I got it. That's very helpful. I appreciate it.
Okay.
So,
And Mike, I have this whole slideshow if you want me to walk you through it, but that answers your specific question.
okay, well, maybe the color temperature, if you sort of walk us through the color temperature thing, and then I think we
Okay. Oh, all right.
probably will be as expert as we can be.
The color temperature, when you refer the K in these numbers refers to the degrees Kelvin. That's just how they have measured that. The higher the Kelvin, the bluer the light. And this shows you the differences between the lower end of Kelvins and the higher end of Kelvins. See the blue light, how it starts to peak. It's the blue light that is emitted by LEDs that isn't emitted by incandescents that has proven to be the problem. And so that's why they've settled on, well, I think came up with 2200 because you can see there's very little blue light. But as you said, it's the 2700 that is commonly available now. So that's where we settled on, why the Massachusetts Medical Society has settled on that. But honestly, there's been so much publicity now about light pollution and the harm that more and more products are becoming available. So I suspect there's going to be products available that are soon that are going to be very affordable under 2700 Kelvin possibly. But the experts I've talked to said 2700, that amount of blue light is acceptable. Street lights actually do come now in 2200, even though you don't have commercial, common use, but street lights, parking lights, everything that is being now manufactured 2200 Kelvin. And in fact, one town in Massachusetts, Pepperell, when they did a street light comparison, when they were choosing to go to LED, they did a blind test, and their residents overwhelmingly chose 2200 Kelvin because of the aesthetics, and they felt it was easier on the eye. Let's see, I had one more. Here shows you the whole scale. So 2200 is, again, what the International Dark Sky Association is aiming for aspirationally. This is what is now recommended by the Massachusetts Medical Society, and that's what we've chosen. I would say incandescent might be more around here somewhere, but it's subtle, as I said before. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else. Oops. Oh, then we get into lumens. We were talking about lumens. I just wanted to show you, you were talking about how to compare. That's the common comparison to incandescent bulbs. But even this depends on how energy efficient the bulb is. So that can change by manufacturer. So
Yeah.
a 60 watt
That's sort of
incandescent
incandescent,
could actually have less lumens if it were more energy efficient. Another thing, I wanted to show you, this is shows you all the different energy efficiencies of different kinds of bulbs. You see it's all over the place. That's why we can't use wattage anymore. People really need to get used to looking at the lumen output.
Good.
And then the last thing on that issue is, just want to point out, Home Depot, this is the lumen limits they recommend for common outdoor lighting applications. And you can see it's actually kind of low. So floodlights, all our guidelines are well within what even Home Depot is now recommending. Anyway, I could go on and on, but that answers, I think, those technical questions.
Okay, that's good. Let me just, that raises one question for me, and that's pool lights.
Oh, pool lights, yes. Well,
Are pool lights regulated? These are the lights inside the pool. Are they regulated by this?
there's an exemption. There's an exemption for any lights that are underwater. So the extent that when you're talking about pool lights that are under the water, those don't have to comply with any of the requirements I've talked about. And that's because the people who've studied said that's not causing the problems. I mean, it may not be appealing to some people, but it's not causing uplighting. It's not causing light trespass. However, any lights on the pool deck itself would have to comply just like any other landscape lighting.
Okay, great. So who has?
And can I also just say, I didn't factor this into it, but somebody asked me the other day. So a lot of people want to light up their walls as sort of a aesthetic thing and to provide lighting. Nothing in the bylaw would prevent you from lighting your walls as long as you did it from the top down. And there's all kinds of fixtures now available for that. This bylaw would just mean you can't have the uplighting. And I did make an exception for very low lumen output of landscaping, trees and shrubs, because you can't go down lighting with trees and shrubs. You can only do it from the bottom up. And a lot of people do find that aesthetically pleasing, and it does serve a functional purpose of keeping people from trampling trees and shrubs at night. So, and flowers. So just wanted to throw that in.
Great. Don.
Yes, given these concerns, presently.
Could you speak up a little bit, Don?
Yeah. That better?
A little bit better.
All right.
I'll put mine up a little bit louder too on my end.
Okay.
Okay.
I know because we did it, Mass Save will come into the home and replace incandescent lights with LED lights. Is there any movement for them to include outdoor lighting in residences?
Well, that's a good question. I actually thought it did include outdoor lighting, but I haven't explored that myself. But what I would say about the Mass Save is they are trying to get you to switch to LED for energy savings, obviously. And the problem with LEDs is that because it's more energy efficient, people tend to actually use more lighting because for the same amount of money, they can get more lighting. So it's not necessarily a good thing to be all these, this push for LEDs, but I understand that's totally the future because the energy efficiency. So what we've got to do is, for people switching to LED, is to stress you still need to keep the light down. Just because it's more energy efficient and more affordable to overlight, you shouldn't do it.
You also mentioned the reason Dutch for doing this is to prevent harms from this, prevent harms from excessive lighting. What harms are they?
Well, light trespass is a harm that could be keeping your neighbors up at night and affecting their enjoyment of their own property. There's glare that often comes from unshielded excessive lighting, which actually creates a public safety hazard. Imagine if you're driving along and there's a bright light right in your eyes. But I think you're probably thinking maybe of the harm to wildlife and humans. There's been a lot of studies over, about 2 decades that shows it's affecting the circadian rhythms of basically every living thing that's been observed, from insects to plants to mammals to humans, because it's affecting the natural day-night cycle. So let's start with wildlife. It affects birds migration. There's a drop in fireflies, there's a drop in pollinating insects. It's been even found to harm coral and marine life if there's so much light, near the coast. And then for humans, the effect on circadian rhythms, hasn't been proven conclusively, but it's been linked to cancers, insomnia, depression, and
Linked by careful studies?
yes, there's been a lot of studies. Even the American Medical Association, AMA, has said that there's harm, that there's reason to believe there's harm too. So that what's certain is that it's affecting circadian rhythms. What I don't think has been proven conclusively with humans is that that disruption of circadian rhythms has caused these other things, a direct correlation, because there can be so many other factors. But with animals, where they've been able to isolate it more, there's so many studies that show the harmful impact. But like I said, even if you don't believe in all of that, you can put that aside and still want to reduce light pollution because of the quality of life issues, which I under that group in the light trespass and glare, and the inability to see the stars at night. I think that's a big harm.
The other thing is, you didn't mention the glare from vehicles.
Glare from vehicles, yes. Unfortunately, our outdoor lighting bylaw can't regulate vehicles. And those are specifically exempt anyway, because they're regulated by federal law, I believe.
Yeah. Peter Kahn. Peter Kahn.
Yes, thanks, Peter. First, Gail, obviously, a lot of work has gone into this, and I commend you. For that. A couple of questions, if I can just put them out there, and then maybe you can just quickly answer them. First, I'd like a little more information on this lighting enforcement officer. What what qualifications, if any, must they have? What are they going to get paid? Do they what right? To what extent can they trespass on your property? So that I'm interested in that. Second.
Sorry, can I answer that first so that I don't lose track?
Okay, sorry.
With my cold, it's just hard to always keep
problem.
track. So let me see. So the lighting enforcement officer is an existing position.
Does anybody fill it at the moment?
Yes, somebody fills it. His name's Marcus Silverstein. But the problem is it's a part-time position. He also serves as the zoning, zoning coordinator or something, zoning compliance coordinator.
Yeah.
And I haven't asked for how he divides his time, but given his lack of enforcement, I would say that the zoning part of his job takes up a lot of time.
He's fully committed to STRs right now, I can assure you.
Right, there's so much he has to be looking at. And there are, as far as qualifications, there's no specific qualifications. If I wanted to make the bylaw even more complicated, I would probably get into that. But I can say about Marcus is that from talking to him now for a couple of years, he didn't even have the right equipment, the right light meter that's needed to enforce the existing bylaw until last year, when I said, look, I'm going to buy you one of these. Nantucket Lights will buy you one of these and get you training on it, because so many of the requirements turn on these measurements of foot candles. So they ended up buying, I didn't have to donate it, they ended up buying one. But he tried to use it and he just sort of gave up. He found it too difficult and he didn't have the time or the interest, I'm not sure which, to get training on it. But what was your other question? Can you go onto property? Yeah, the existing bylaw didn't answer that question. So that was one of the things I wanted to address in the proposed bylaw. So I got advice of town council. So the existing bylaw is explicit about this. He can go on to private property for enforcement reasons if he's invited, has the permission of the property owner, or he could go through the process of getting an administrative search warrant. And what that would mean if somebody's lighting is so bad and a neighbor complains and the person who has the lighting won't let him come on to check certain, what kind of, like, for example, what the lumen output is, and he's not willing, the property owner is not willing to provide that information. He could, in extreme circumstances, get an administrative search warrant pursuant to his powers under the under the proposed bylaw. I think that would have been true under the existing bylaw, according to town council, but it wasn't explicit, so I made it explicit.
So do you propose that this become a full-time position, or if so, what kind of pay are you? What's it going to cost?
Yes. Yes, I addressed that in my answers to the FinCom questionnaire. Because of the proposal to have an outdoor lighting permit process, you would definitely need a full-time person to handle that, in addition to the other just enforcement duties. And the cost would be the salary. I was advised by Leslie Snell, who is the Deputy Director of Planning and who supervises the lighting enforcement officer. The cost would be around $80,000, $90,000 at most for a full-time employee. I tried to find out what the cost of the benefits package that would go along with that, but the town manager has not responded to my query about that. But even assuming it's $100,000, that could be covered by the application fees for the outdoor lighting permits by my calculations. The wiring inspector estimated that if the bylaw adopted, there'd be about 1,200 applications a year. And I forget what I calculated, but if you made it like, well, 1,200, if you made it $100, that would be more than enough to pay for a full-time person. And I don't know if the bylaw were to pass, whether it would, Marcus would, I don't know which position he would be assigned to or want to do. I expect he would stay with the zoning, since that is what he knows best. And a new person would be needed for the LEO position. In my opinion, I think it should be somebody, ideally it would be an electrician because they would know lumens and color temperatures. I mean, to a trained eye, you can tell, even me, and I've only been involved in this a few years, I can see a light and say, oh, that's way more than 2,700 Kelvin, or the lumen output is. So I would like to see it to be an electrician. And I've actually been working with an electrician on Nantucket. He's been one of the ones advising me. He currently serves as the chief electrician for the White Elephant Resorts properties. And he's been working since 2016 to make their lighting dark sky compliant, going beyond what the existing bylaw required because they wanted to do the right thing. And they're currently undertaking now more changes to comply with my proposed regulations, even without waiting to see if they've been passed, because they want to do the right thing. He expressed an interest in the job, actually, and he lives on island, he owns a home. And so I would love to see somebody like that be in the position, who takes it seriously and who knows and finds the technical terminology and standards easy to understand.
Peter, I've got two more questions, but I'll pass and pass and let somebody else ask, and I'll come back.
Kathy, I think you had a question, and then Ralph, I know you had your hand's been up. Yeah. Kathy, you're on mute.
Yes.
Kathy.
Just a quick question, Gail. On the outdoor lighting where you have, motion detector lighting that comes on, how does that work? I think you said that's okay if it's not, because it's short periods of time.
Right. The way it's written, there's a general exemption for temporary lighting that's needed to avoid risk to life, limb, or property. And I construe that to mean, and I intended when I wrote it to mean anything on motion sensors. So if something's on just temporarily with a motion sensor, and I didn't define temporary, I probably should have, but it's not on all night. Or if somebody goes out to flip a switch on a floodlight, when they want to let their dog out or something, or to go, I don't know, take the garbage out. To me, that's all exempted. It's just what I'm aiming for is to regulate light that's on all night.
Thank you.
Ralph?
Thank you. Peter, I have a question for Gail and a more extended comment. I don't want to lose the chance to give that later, perhaps. But Gail, thank you very much for a very clear presentation. I appreciated that. And I want to tell you that how you look in your square on the Zoom screen is a great testimony to your purpose, because you're in front of a dark sky, rich with constellations and stars and comets. It's the background you would see. Each one of you should just Google Nantucket Lights and also the International Dark Sky Association. You have this wonderful rich sky, but yours is totally wiped out today by your front lighting. So you have almost no stars visible in your background.
There you go. Is that better?
Well, it's getting there, but it's like the worst city in America right now. So what I'm saying is that you're proving your point, maybe in a way you didn't imagine.
I wanted my face to look good to you.
Okay, well, you're good job. I have a technical question first about lumens. I understand the 600 lumen limit to be per bulb. Is that correct?
Well, no. So some fixtures have integrated.
Well, let's say per fixture.
It's per fixture. I call it the luminaire, because the luminaire could mean a fixture or it could mean a light bulb, but it's the output of the fixture. Okay,
so that's an important point. I'm thinking of the Disneyland effect, where you take a 600 lumen fixture and you line up 100 of them in front of a building. So you really need to measure it lumens per square foot or some other measure, right, to get the full impact. Is there something in the regulations that does?
Yes. I didn't go into it of the time restrictions, but if you look under the general restrictions under the lumen output, all right, there's lumen limits per site that are based, there's an allowance per acre. You have total lumens allowed in the aggregate for unshielded luminaires. So that is to address what you just said, like if you had onion lights and you just put 10 in a row to avoid to get around that 600 lumen limitation, that probably wouldn't be allowed by this, the lumen cap for unshielded luminaires in the aggregate. And then you have a maximum lumen amount allowed per luminaire. That's actually set pretty high at for residential properties at 1,500 lumens, and that's really to go towards the floodlights and spotlights that some manufacturers are just, they're promoting, 4,000, 5,000 Kelvin lumen, spotlights with, I can't even tell you the lumen. The lumens are like out of this world. So 1,500 lumens per luminaire is meant to cap those kind of lights. So altogether, all of those lumen limits is just to go to exactly what you said.
What page, can you point me to the page on the regulation that says that?
So the copy I have, is isolated to my bylaw. If you're talking about, are you talking about the warrant article itself?
Yeah.
Like the whole warrant article for 18?
Yeah, because I don't want to read the whole
Okay.
thing again. I just want to find this point.
Yeah, I think it's 102-4.
That's the section. He wanted the page limit, but let me see.
Well, section is fine.
Section. Okay, I'm sorry. Section is 102-4C.
Great, thank you very much. Peter, I have a comment about the health aspects. I can hold that till later if you want to talk more about technical stuff.
Why don't you do that? Are there going to be other questions that people have?
I do.
Yeah. Peter, go ahead.
Okay. I just want to be clear here. Am I correct that there is no enforcement for anything inside the house?
Correct.
All right. But how do you distinguish? I mean, if we're talking about light pollution, I mean, I appreciate that and sort of welcome that. But how do you distinguish that between someone having a strobe light in their living room, right? And you've got windows, and it's so is it just drawing a lot? Just drawing a line here?
Yeah, because already noted, many of you, it's complicated enough as it is to regulate everything outside. So I did not attempt to address indoor lighting this time. That could be something possibly down the road. There's a few other things that this doesn't address because like until it's a proven established problem, I didn't want to get ahead of it. But lighting of greenhouses is becoming a real issue. Talk about lighting inside that's impacting the night sky. So some communities are now requiring what's called blackout shades to be put on at night for greenhouses. I didn't address that. So, you know, I didn't get all my wish list into this.
Let me ask you this. I like Ralph. I'm a big fan of the outdoor sky, as I suspect most people who spend time on Nantucket are. So, I mean, I think, are there any other communities, like on the Cape, for example, or other areas where there is relatively limited or was very limited light pollution that have adopted something similar to this that you can point to?
Good question. Not on the Cape, as far as I know, not on Martha's Vineyard. I've been looking through all the regulations in Massachusetts. There are a lot of towns that have regulated them, but they're now way out of date. But the one who comes closest to what I'm proposing is called, just drawing a blank. Hold on a second. My head is spinning with all the information that I've had to collect for this. Sorry, hold on. I know it's in here somewhere. I'm so sorry.
That's right. Why don't you just send us something?
It starts with a P. Hold on. Oh, wait a minute. I know what it. Hold on. It's in my draft answers. Just give me 1 second. It's in my draft answers to FinCom's questions because they asked the same thing. There you go. Oh, Pelham, P-E-L-H-A-M. I hadn't even heard of it. It's in Western Mass near Amherst. They adopted new regulations in 2018, so almost 4 years ago, and they require residential fixtures to be fully shielded. They prohibit color temperatures above 2,700 Kelvin. They also have lumen limits per fixture and per site. It's a little more complicated and more restrictive than what I'm proposing, and they have a curfew. So it does what they don't have some of the things that are now recommended as best practices by the International Dark Sky Association. I'm not sure if that's because those recommendations came about after they adopted theirs or they weren't aware of them. And for that, I'll note one of my guiding things was I was trying to meet the requirements for International Dark Sky Community Certification. That is a program that the International Dark Sky Association has to recognize communities that have, are doing the most to protect their dark skies. And there's many hoops to jump through to get that certification, but one of them is to have regulations that comply with some very stringent requirements. And so I was following those. And so some of the things that you see in my proposal aren't in the Pelham one. But that might be because, again, they weren't going for that certification or may not have known about it. Because I'm following the recommendations that they developed in 2018, which would have been around the time that Pelham adopted theirs. And I should also, I guess, say the Massachusetts chapter of the International Dark Sky Association is trying hard to get the communities all over Massachusetts to adopt better outdoor lighting regulations. And they're in the process of coming up with what they're calling they're trying to give guidance, a model. And I looked at a draft of that and drafting mine and tried to adopt as much of that as I thought would be palatable to people on Nantucket. But that hasn't come out yet. But once that comes out, I'm thinking that other communities in Massachusetts will hopefully follow suit. But we actually have it a little easier because we're an island 30 miles out. We don't have a lot of, we don't have high rises. We don't have a lot of industrial areas. So if anybody in Massachusetts should be able to do this, I feel like Nantucket should, and we could be a leader on this.
Okay.
So,
Thank you very much.
Peter, do you have something else?
No, that's fine.
Just before we go back to Ralph, oh, Donna, go ahead.
I just had a quick comment. Gail, thank you so much for this presentation. It's very detailed, very thorough. I know Palm Springs, California is addressing this. And maybe there are communities across the country
Oh, yeah.
we could draw from.
Yes, yes. Oh, gosh. Yes, I'm sorry. He asked, Peter Kahn asked about Massachusetts in particular, but I should have mentioned. So there are towns all over the country that are adopting some form of these regulations. The leader has actually been like, well, I think I did look at 2 places in California that were recently certified as International Dark Sky communities. I think they were certified in 2020, so figured they would be a good model to follow. I looked at theirs. I think Arizona, New Mexico, the West, a lot of communities are doing it. But you actually even have whole countries. New Zealand's trying to address it on a federal level, national level. So I did look at a lot. I have a whole notebook.
So let me just.
I have a whole notebook of places.
Gail, I think the answer is there are other communities throughout the country that have adopted these things, right? And
They have adopted
that was
something
the question.
similar. I would say my is the most up to date because the standards are continuing to evolve what IDA, International Dark Sky Association, thinks are best practices. So they're very similar. Like I said, Pelham is a good example in Massachusetts, but mine would be the most up to date.
Okay, Donna, yeah.
Yeah, if I could just quickly follow. Gail, in your presentation, and then it sounds like the town is resisting this, maybe. Perhaps starting off with mentioning how many countries and cities are awakened to this concern, and something Nantucket should perhaps really consider.
That's a wonderful suggestion, Donna. I've done so much research. I don't even know how I would count all of them. I don't even know. IDA has a list of all the communities who are International Dark Sky communities around the world. So that's a good start because they obviously would have good regulations, some similar. But there's so many out there who have adopted regulations who haven't gone for that certification that may be off the radar screen. And so I do a Google alert that alerts me that anything related to light pollution and dark skies. And I see so many organizations. I think there was just one yesterday where different groups or different states, different organizations are trying to tackle this. The list would be endless.
Good.
It's really a global movement. It's not.
I think,
it's not just me.
Important to state. I think
Yeah,
that's important to state for when you address the town.
Well, so just to follow up on that, the fact of the matter is, I believe the town is advertising, certainly in the Chamber and Commerce, that, one of the great assets of Nantucket, why tourists should come are the night skies, or at least were the night skies. If you could find that, I think you would have a very good argument.
Well,
I think we'd have to really reinforce that so that the town understands that it's better to be in the vanguard rather than sort of in the caboose.
Okay.
I've tried, Donna. I will keep trying.
We're running way over time.
Sorry.
And Ralph, you had a comment that you want to make, and then we'll move on.
Gail, I'm going to make a suggestion, and I hope you hear it as helpful.
Okay.
My suggestion is that you remove from all your literature mention about human health as a rationale, and here's why. You may have no reason to, nobody here may have any reason to think of me as knowledgeable here, but I'll tell you who I am. I'm a physician, I'm a medical scientist, and I have research on epidemiology and specifically on cancer epidemiology. And I have some knowledge of the International Association of Dark Sky because of my previous association with astronomers. And I know that the board of the IDA is made up largely of people interested in astronomy, ecology, science, and politics, but there's precious little on that board about human health. Now, why do I suggest taking it out? Because the research that you quoted, not you particularly, but this 400-page manifesto, the research there about human health is deeply flawed. It is largely speculative, it's anecdotal, and it's correlational. Now, I'm not talking about circadian rhythms at all. That stuff is fine. I'm not making an argument against science. I'm making an argument against using human health. I believe it is a scare tactic. All of us on the island are thinking, oh my God, I don't want to get diabetes. Oh, I don't want to get cancer. I should turn the lights out. Well, that's totally unsupported by the science and is illogical. And the most important reason here is you don't need it. You got plenty of other arguments that are salient. It's the dark sky. Maybe it's the science of insects. Maybe it is the aesthetics. You have enough arguments. So I would advise you to remove the one argument that is deeply flawed.
Okay, I will think about that. Ralph, I would really encourage you to talk to that doctor that I copied on my email to you, because he's the most aware. I mean, I'm obviously not a doctor and haven't looked at the studies themselves, but he would disagree with you. But also, there was also a recent study not having to do with cancer, diabetes, physical health, but on mental health, just not being able to see the stars. And I condensed that down to, well, just being able to see the stars is good for the soul. So I know it's a nuanced article, but I get your point. I don't need it because there's so many other reasons to regulate.
Right. I'm not a doctor of the soul either. So I won't give you an opinion there. And I'm glad to have a conversation if it would help. But I'm sure that there's room for disagreement. If you put 1,000 scientists in a room, you'll get 1,000 opinions about this. So that's not really my point. My point is that don't gild the lily with a final argument that is not necessary, especially if it's flawed. You have enough ammunition.
So I have one quick question, and that has to do with the application across the town. And this, I think it's section 102-2A, applicability. Says the chapter shall apply to all outdoor lighting in all zoning districts, etc. And it seems to me that there are vast differences between the zoning districts in this town. You have downtown where wildlife may not have the same concerns as someplace out like Monomoy, where there are bigger tracts of land. And so is there, I've not looked carefully enough to see whether there are different requirements for different zoning districts in town. Just see that sentence that applies all over unless otherwise stated.
So no, I didn't go the route of different rules for different zones. A lot of the bigger communities who have bigger downtowns have done that. It actually makes regulation even more complicated, like how you divide it up and everything. So what I went with were the suggestions for a rural community. So you have communities like where there's an urban area and a rural area, but I consider even the historic distance kind of rural. I mean, if we want to preserve the charm of our historic districts and the downtown, we really need to bring the lighting down and not treat it like an urban area, in my opinion. And it would complicate an already complicated regulation even more. So that's why I didn't go that route.
Thanks. So here's my question to the members today. Do we want to take a position? Don't we want to take a position? And if we want to take a position, what is that position? Mr. Khan.
I would suggest that we have an opportunity for fulsome discussion among the committee. And we're not going to have that today. We don't have enough time. And I would suggest we push that part to the next meeting, which will be certainly still well in advance of any public meeting.
I'm fine with that. Anybody else have a thought on this? Gary
I
Bella.
second that. I agree with what Peter just said.
Good. Well, Gail, thank you very much. I apologize for calling you Sullivan. That was my script. Were you formerly a Sullivan, or I don't know where that came from?
Never.
No,
I kept my
okay.
mating name. I don't know where that came from, but that's okay.
That's my bad. I just
I
have a friend named Gail Sullivan and that's
Yeah.
sorry, my bad.
Not a problem.
Thank you
I
so much
appreciate
for giving me this
I
opportunity.
can recite anything I've been given. But thanks a lot, Gail. And as I echo other people, that this is an enormous amount of work that has been done. It's a subject, I think, of interest and importance to the island. The solution, for me personally, the question is how big is the problem, and what is the appropriate solution that fits? And for me personally, it's basically my neighbors shining lights directly into my property. Otherwise, we have pretty dark sky above us, and
I would encourage all of you to, I don't know if they're public record, but I could provide them to you. Supporters have asked, how they can support this proposal. So there's a number have written very heartfelt letters to FinCom supporting it, where they give their own personal experiences. And I agree. I think two concerns really top the list. One is light shining into my home or onto my property that I don't want. And two, it might not be where you are, but in many places people can no longer see the stars as well. And that is really concerning to a lot of people. So thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you. And I do hope when you take it up that you will vote to support it. I would really appreciate that.
You're one of the stars that I will think about when I look at the night sky now.
Thank you very much.
Bruce Mandel, are you still alive? You're there. Great. I guess the next issue is motor scooters. And Bruce, you probably don't, we met very, very briefly many, many years ago in the public service building when I was attending a meeting here, and you were, we exchanged pleasantries. I think you were behind glass at the time. I think the issue of the day then, which you have since successfully shepherded through, was the packaging issue and straws and things of that nature. So you've got quite a track record on the island. It's not like you're leaving a path of detritus that we can follow. It's rather you've cleaned things up, and I see this is this year's effort. So if you would sort of tell us about it, Gary, you had.
As a point of order, we've spent a lot of time on this other proposal. I hope you'll make sure we have enough time to hear the progress of the short-term working group during this meeting. I don't want that to get crowded out. And I appreciate Bruce has an important message to give to us, but I don't want to miss that other opportunity, which is on our agenda. Thank you.
Thanks. Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to be brief. I've sent you folks some information about this article. This citizens warrant article proposes to amend Chapter 98 of the Code of the Town of Nantucket, and that's the motorized passenger devices chapter. It's very short, and I'm doing this for two safety-related issues only. The article basically leaves the current existing language of Chapter 98 unchanged. And what I sent to you, you should have gotten a copy, is the article with some highlighting to show what I'm proposing to amend. And very simply, this chapter basically says that no person shall operate a motorized scooter, skateboard, Segway, or similar device on any town-owned or town-controlled public way, sidewalk, park, etc. Now, this chapter was created almost 2 decades ago. And it was created for the safety of citizens and visitors, to protect them as they use the sidewalks, parks, playgrounds, beaches, and that kind. And at that time, Nantucket was just beginning to develop bike paths. And the town is moving away from that term, bike paths, now. They use various terms in various documents, shared use pass, multi-use pass, but the official term now is side paths. So I just wanted to, when you hear these terms, they are very similar. And I want to make the point that these side paths or bike paths were never intended for use by motorized vehicles other than emergency, police, and EMT vehicles. Now, since the time that these chapter was formulated, they were only worried about motorized scooters. And the definition of a scooter is a 2-passenger motorbike. You've seen it. They get rented downtown. You see the people with the colorful helmets on going down the road. Motorized skateboards and Segways. Those are those balancing devices that you stand on and you can move up and down, 2-wheel balancing board. Now, since the time of the chapter, 2 decades ago, more types of motorized vehicles have been invented and developed. Advanced technologies, more powerful electric motors. Therefore, the chapter's list of these devices needs to be updated. And that's one of the 2 purposes of this article, is to update that list. Now, there's more than 280 miles of roads on Nantucket. Only 31 have side paths. So the proposed article makes no changes to the existing language. It doesn't delete any language, and it doesn't rewrite the chapter. It updates the list of the motorized personal devices that are not supposed to be on sidewalks. And then it equates bike paths, side paths, whatever you want to call them, to sidewalks, because they're being used by pedestrians to walk, to run. They're pushing their baby scooters along and things of that nature. So the purpose is to provide a level of safety to those pedestrians who are using it. So the article will not adversely affect any business in town. Even the bicycle touring businesses don't use motorized bicycles. They'll still be able to use the bike paths, and pedal-powered bicycles will still be able to use these side paths, bike paths. I've already reached out to and met with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee in November. At my initiative, we reviewed the article, and they decided to consider this at their next meeting, which has not happened yet. They haven't calendared a meeting since November. Now, at a recent meeting of the FinCom, the chairperson of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, who did not attend the November meeting, stated that the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee could not support this article. But no vote was ever taken. This ended up being his personal opinion. The Mattocket Conservation Association has endorsed this. They've surveyed their entire membership and about 690 property owners in a recent survey. They're very concerned about safety. This article was discussed at the Civic League's annual president's meeting, and it received their endorsement. Town council and town administration reviewed the article before it was submitted in October. Town council says it's in good shape. He wonders a little bit about enforcement, which I'll talk about in a minute. There's no additional anticipated cost to the town associated with the article. Enforcement of the article continues as the chapter is written. It's passive. It's similar to the excessive noise regulation, outdoor night lighting regulations, fertilizer use, the single-use plastic bylaw. It's passive. Someone has to make a complaint. And then the town will either send someone out or they will deal with it in a way that's pretty ineffective. I'll give you an example. I live in Mattocket, and we use the Mattocket bike path for bicycling and walking. And we had two incidents that were the impetus for me creating this article. One, I was struck by an electric bike. It knocked me down. The guy on the bike slowed down, looked behind him and said, "Oops, sorry," and he continued on. People say, "Well, Bruce, why didn't you take a picture? You could have used the picture to report him." There's no way you can reach into your pocket, pull out your camera, pocket your cell phone, activate it, and take a picture. Another time I was walking on the bike path, and my 6-year-old granddaughter was struck by an e-bike, knocked her to the ground, cut her chin. The rider kept going, didn't stop. And I, of course, was more concerned with getting her treated, 2 stitches, and she was okay, all healed up. There have been other incidents of people being struck by motorized skateboards, balance boards. I sent you pictures of these. This is a unicycle. People balance on it. And this is a balance board. It's got a wheel in the middle of a board. Now, these are capable of reaching speeds of up to 22 miles an hour. They don't belong on a bike path where people are walking or on a sidewalk. This is a scooter, electric scooter. It's got a handlebar with a throttle and a little clamp, little handle for a brake. This little guy goes 20 miles an hour. So these devices, by the way, are legally allowed to use the roads. And they can go from between 20 and 40 miles an hour. The speed limit in Mattocket on Mattocket Road is 25 miles an hour. So I'm just going through my notes quickly to try to skip things because I know you're under pressure. People who are walking on the bike path or sidewalks walk between 3 and 3.5 miles an hour. I sent you some information about a very intensive study that was done in the Netherlands, which is the most bicycle dense country in Europe. The average pedal power bicycle, not motorized, runs at about 9 to 12 miles an hour, easily controllable with the braking systems. So the intent here is to limit these vehicles from being on sidewalks and to limit them from, and to equate sidewalks with the bike paths, because they're essentially the same thing. I sent you a 400-page document done by Amsterdam University. The Netherlands separates their pedestrians, their pedal-powered bikes, and they have separate bike paths. Motorized bikes are not allowed on the bike paths with the pedestrians. They have to drive in the road. New York City, Central Park. On the weekends, the entire park is turned over to pedestrians for strolling, pushing baby carriages, enjoying the outdoors. People use rollerblades to skate, but motorized personal devices, including e-bikes, are prohibited from use because of safety. Now, I've got lots, I could go on and on about this, but I know you guys have other things to do, but I'd like to answer any questions you have. I spoke to the chief of police about this. He has no objections, except he's wondering about enforcement. There are 3 police officers on duty every day patrolling. You've got the east sector, the central sector, and the western sector. By the time I get struck by an e-bike on a bike path and call the non-emergency or the emergency number, that patrol officer is not going to get there in time to see the perpetrator. And he knows that you can't distinguish. People said, well, how about slower electric bikes? You can't, when I put up a picture of an electric bike, there's no way you can determine whether the bicycle, and these bicycles are divided into levels 1, 2, and 3 based on their speeds. There's no way you can determine whether one is a level 1, so therefore it might be okay, but a level 2 and 3 is not okay. So we're addressing all of them. They're all capable of driving on the roads. It's legal. They travel at speeds that's not going to block traffic. And the chief was worried about road rage incidents. And it's a legitimate concern. But look, these things don't belong on sidewalks or bike paths. So that's the essence of the whole thing. Updating the list of vehicles and getting them off the sidewalks.
Okay, Peter Kahn.
Quick question. If a police officer is driving by and observes a electric bike or a scooter or what have you on a bike path, I take it there's nothing to stop him or her from pulling that individual over and issuing a summons.
That's a good comment. Yes, there's nothing to stop them from doing that. Generally, the reaction to this is similar to the other passive enforcements, stopping the perpetrator. And the first thing the cop's going to do is ask him not to go on the bike path and tell him, hey, you're not supposed to be here on the bike path, you belong on the road. And I seriously doubt if the cop's going to spend the time writing that fella a summons for a violation like that first time. Just tell him.
Here's my point. I'm not actually arguing for your proposal. It seems to me that the fact that there's no enforcement, so to speak, look, we're not going to be issuing tickets to these people. What will occur is to embarrass them, to get and to get the word out there that the police are actually doing something when they see it. And so I'm not, if they see it, so they see it. Hopefully the word will go out. I must say, I tend to agree with the chief. I get pretty upset when when I'm driving behind a scooter or an underpowered vehicle on the road. I mean, I think that is as much of a problem, arguably, as interfering with the pedestrians. But I take your point, and I think it's a good one.
Thank you.
Gene?
Yeah, one question. If I have an electric bike, but I have the electric motor shut off, so because I can use it as just a regular manually operated bicycle, how does that fall in your proposal? Because there are probably a lot of people who had regular bicycles and now decided they needed a new bicycle and got an electric one, but they still use it mainly for exercise and have the motor shut off 75, 80, maybe 100% of the time.
Well, it's a very interesting question. It's something that we spoke about. Once again, it's very difficult to tell the difference, but just by looking at a pedal powered bike that can also be switched over to the battery. My answer to you is stay healthy, use your bike. You're allowed to use your bike on the road. Stay off the bike path. If you want to use your bike in electric mode, you don't belong on the sidewalks. And there's plenty of roadway here. These bicycles are becoming more and more complicated. As a matter of fact, for those of you that have just pedal powered bicycles, there is a kit you can buy online to adapt your pedal powered bicycle to be motorized. And it takes about 15 minutes to hook it up. But Gene, that's a very complicated question, and trying to make exceptions to something that happens in an instant when someone is hit is very difficult. The idea is to educate the public not to be on the sidewalks or the side paths with these powerful bikes. There are some electric bikes that can go up to 40 miles an hour. And let me tell you something. If you get hit by a bicycle, electric bicycle, just doing 15 miles an hour, it's like getting hit by an NFL linebacker running full speed. It hurts and it knocks you down. So, and I'm telling you that from my personal experience.
Okay, I guess the next question is, do we, I think we can do the same thing we did with the Nantucket Lights proposal and take this up at a further meeting now, because we are running out of time to discuss STRs. Does anybody have any objection to that? Gary?
No, I think that's a good idea. I also think that this committee ought to wait to find out what the recommendation of that committee that was supposed to regulate the bikes and the roads. And as Bruce said, they haven't come to a conclusion yet. I think we ought to have that input as well before we make our decision.
Well,
I think we should move on.
Yeah.
Gary, I think
Can I just
you
ask
have- I just want to answer Gary. I think you have the decision of that committee. The person that made those comments about them not being able to support the proposal, even though they haven't voted on it, is the chairman of the committee. So,
One vote. That's one vote, Bruce.
hmm?
One vote. You
They
only
did.
had one vote, Bruce.
They didn't vote, and who knows if they even will vote. They meet about twice a year. But I take your point. I have no problem with you folks waiting. I met with the FinCom. They voted to take no action because several of the members there have biking businesses, and they were most concerned with the e-bikes. And I'll have to tell you, the list of devices that this mentions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, mentions 8 different types of vehicles, personal vehicles. Only 2 of them are bicycles. So there's other vehicles here. And at the FinCom, the number one concern is, hey, people use bicycles to go to work. Well, they can still use their bicycles with this article. It's just if they're electric bicycles, they have to be more careful and stay off the sidewalks. But anyway.
I think we got that point. I think we absolutely have the point. This is sort of motorized or no motorized. And then there are additional issues as to putting those motorized issues on those 31 miles of streets and what that causes. But it's something that we don't have time now to sort of debate and think about further. Donna?
I just had a quick question. Any thought about just saying 5 miles an hour or 10 miles an hour on a bike path? Has that been considered?
I didn't hear the question. My internet.
Speed limit. The question
Any thought about limiting the miles per hour to 5 or 10, and then after that you have to go into the road?
Yes, we talked with the chief about that and several people. That would require some skill in determining how fast a bicycle is going. Somebody had to be standing there. It would have to be sufficiently metal for them to use a radar detector or something on it. It's very difficult to tell. And 5 miles an hour isn't much faster than you walk.
Well,
and let me add one thing.
Right.
As the chairman mentioned, I've been active in the single-use plastic issues. I've come before the town 4 times to amend that article to add things to it. Nip bottles, flushable wipes, things of that nature. In every case, the finance committee and the select board have advised not to adopt. And in each case at town meeting, they were overwhelmingly approved by the voters. Because what we're dealing is public safety and we're dealing in environmental issues. So some of the opinions of some of these committees are not exactly driven by things that are in the best interests of the entire population. Self-interests come into play as these committees vote.
Okay. Well, our remit is just to give advice to the select board on these things, and we've heard what you said and appreciate your coming here, appreciate your public activity, and I think we're now going to go on to our last subject and try to get finished for the next 16 minutes if we can.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate the time. As far as Gail's article is concerned, the Macket Conservation Association voted overwhelmingly to support it.
Bruce, enough.
Yep.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
thank you.
Peter, and I guess the bill has done something else at this point.
No.
Where do we stand with the STRs and?
Well, we had, okay, I'll be brief here, because
Yeah.
there's really not a lot to report. We had a meeting, I guess it would be 2 weeks ago, this coming Tuesday, whatever the date that would have been. It was a class, as far as I was concerned, it was a classic waste of time. It was total, all process, no substance, zero substance. It is, we're just sort of sitting there, we're spinning. We might as well have not have had the meeting because we're waiting for the quote unquote data to show up. And so it was a total waste. Now we're having another meeting this Tuesday evening. There will be no data. I don't know what it is that we're going to be addressing at this point. So I mean, maybe Kathy has a better sense of that than I do, but I am afraid that, we've got three hours scheduled. And I have no idea what we're going to be addressing. Kathy, you're on mute. Okay.
Yeah, the meeting was mostly consumed with the consultant doing an overview presentation, a summary of the feedback that was gathered during the public input meeting in December.
Yeah.
And so it mimicked what we all heard at that meeting, but and the most significant feedback point I think was where's the definition of the problem?
We've already discussed, yeah, when we discussed, I mean, I think we discussed that within our own group here, our meeting following that. So everybody's heard, yeah, right. Everybody knows that the town.
Yeah, and then the town is going into a very opaque process to get data. So the real estate folks have put their data forward to an independent aggregator who's going to take all of the information without identity information, so there won't be people's names and so forth, to an aggregator who's summarizing all the data elements that the short-term rental group asked to see. That's a path that's going down in parallel with the town. I don't know where they're getting their data from. I think it's the online platforms, or they're trying to get the online platforms. It's unclear how much of it's going to be Granicus, where they're going to get it from, and how these two parallel paths are going to align. So there were some members, and myself included, expressing, well, how do you put this all together? How do you do this? How can the short-term rental group people not be involved in this process on either end? We're just going to be given a bunch of data in March, perhaps, maybe not March, where we haven't been involved in its collection or validation or even definition of the data elements. And so every time members offer their support in working with the town or with anybody on this, it's going to violate open meeting law. You can't do it. So that's basically, I don't know if we'll get any data in March. We're also not permitted to talk about the actual short-term rental articles that are going to come before town meeting. So I expressed a concern that we ought to be able to discuss them, not to take a stand on them, but to make sure that we all understand what they mean. So if one or more of them get passed at town meeting in the spring, that we have a plan B, because what we do depends on what comes out of town meeting in the spring, because those articles will be voted on. So there's just, we're not really getting anywhere at this point. And the concern that we had seems to be what the public is saying is we don't have a problem definition, so it's pretty hard to solve a problem where it's not written down. So this upcoming meeting, I believe we're going to be looking at all the different policy levers that were thrown in front of the public meeting group to see, okay, we don't have data. What data would drive our decision on that lever, and what would be the possible impacts of if we pulled that lever and put it in a policy? So we're going to go through that process just because we don't have the data.
It's make work. It's just make work. It's a waste. It's really actually, I mean, I find it to be an imposition on our time. I mean, we ought to be saving the time of the STR members for the real work, and if we have to do double time later, that's fine. But this to me personally is just make work, and we're getting nowhere. And it's an embarrassment. I think it's an embarrassment of how this whole thing has been run, and I think any of us could have gotten to the bottom of this a lot quicker. But so be it. So Gary, I mean, it's a shame, but basically nothing has happened since we last talked.
Peter, what about the actual registration process?
Has
it begun in town or not?
It's not. Correct me, Kathy, if I'm wrong, but it's not up and running yet.
I can't believe it.
No, I believe it.
2023 in November.
Yeah,
Back to November now.
and there's they keep saying that's not our purview, but that's exactly the great question. Why are they not rolling this out? Are they trying to save money that they would have paid Granicus to run this process and giving it to the consultants so they can extend their contract to the special town meeting, which is going to be November 7th, by the way? So we have no idea why the town has not announced anything. It's just rumor that they're not going to launch and they're basically just going to skip this whole year and start next year, even though there's a bylaw that says it's this year. So
isn't that registration process supposed to be part of the data, produce data that you guys?
Yes,
Of course.
Yes.
it would be the
So
only
can I-
independent place where all the data would be in one place. So yeah, to put it off another year is crazy.
Crazy.
Have they really put it off another year? Have they said
Yes.
they're not starting
Yes.
it?
Oh, I hadn't heard that. I had not heard that.
It's rumor. They haven't announced anything.
No.
Okay.
But
But
that's
the-
what we're
the-
hearing.
but the-
Can I
it's
just say
required by
something?
the article that was passed requires it. They can't put it off a year. Well, I guess they could say we're in the process of hiring, but they're not permitted to just say we'll start it a year from now. If there's
Donna?
it's the law,
Yes,
that's
can I
the
just,
legislature the town meeting made that decision, and it should be attended to.
Can I just say something? I've been on these STR meetings just as an observer. I sign in and listen. Kathy, Peter Kahn, it's crazy. I mean, we've all attended meetings over years and years of our careers. I cannot believe how inept this is being run. It's terrible, absolutely terrible. And I don't know how, I was at the last meeting again, 3 hours. I took a break and took a phone call. I mean, and I don't know how you guys do this. Terrible. There's no productivity. They seem to hire more and more consultants, and they're going nowhere. There are no clear objectives. There's no agenda that they follow. I've never heard of something like this. It's very discouraging. Very disappointing.
Yeah, it's almost as if they get paid by the hour.
I think so, because they're not even producing anything.
No, right.
Terrible.
Is there any
This
clarification?
is Nantucket.
Is there any clarification yet as to whether the select board or the planning board or the finance committee or someone or the moderator is going to say anything at the town meeting that was discussed before, which is to suggest that they should allow the short-term working group to formulate something, which is why they now have a special town meeting, planned for November. Has that been an official position taken yet by the select board, the moderator? Is someone going to actually say that at the after town meeting?
Yes, I think the town and the planning board has already said so, and that's the plan for all of the town committees to say they're going to vote not to adopt, they're going to recommend not to adopt any of the citizens articles. But that doesn't mean people will, just like Bruce said earlier, that doesn't mean people won't vote on them and vote them in or not. So there's no, that's the only thing I know.
Yeah, I on behalf of our group, I wrote to the select board after our last meeting, suggesting that, giving our advice on that and one other issue, and it's a take no action thing. And I didn't even get a thank you for sending, but I don't think they usually do. But it's, we're going to watch this play out. It is painful, because I watched, I think, the last hour of the last meeting, and it's being run like a mediation and litigation, but without forceful mediators. They're hoping like the group is going to sort of come up with some sort of solution everybody could agree to by themselves, which they will eventually have to do. But the group, I think, has pretty forcefully said, we need a certain amount of data. People don't want to define the problem because they have different views of what the problem is, and they think they probably can't reach agreement on it. It's just I think the demoralizing thing is that you've been at it now for almost 6 months, I think, and there's really nothing to show for it. Too bad.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we should just discuss. I think one of the other things on the agenda is for new members who are waiting, swearing in the appointment order. And just so everybody understands what that is, the way in which this committee was designed is that there would be every, I think, 3-year appointments, and then approximately a third of the people on the committee would be renewed or eliminated every 3 years or so. And so we're down so many members that when people come in, some people will get 1-year appointments, some people get 2-year appointments, and some people get 3-year appointments in order to fill that regular rotation out. They
can seek reappointment, then they'll likely get reappointment at the end of the term.
And if everybody keeps her nose clean and attends meetings on a regular basis, there'd be no reason not to be reappointed. So long as you haven't committed I guess, a felony. But I think that's really up to the town the administrator who's making the appointments to figure out whether it's first come, first serve on the longevity or whatever. I'm not sure that it's our remit to suggest, who gets what position, but just so when you are eventually sworn in, you might ask, and for how long? I don't know if anybody else has a view on that particular issue.
Well, the only view I have is that I don't understand why you can't be sworn in virtually. It's absolutely
I don't
ridiculous.
either. I don't either, but
It's state law.
Well, I still don't understand it, but that's
But the emergency still is in effect. We haven't heard anything about that April 23rd day, have we?
oh yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah.
Nothing yet.
No.
so I think zoning bylaw 40, I don't think we have anything to discuss on that really at this point. This is the time sharing and interval ownership. That seems to be a developing scenario. And so I guess the question is, when should our next meeting be?
What's 2 weeks?
25th.
20th of February?
Yep.
Yeah, I could do that.
I'm around here. Yep.
Does
Okay.
it work for others?
I can do it.
Good.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
to clarify the minutes, for the minutes, Peter, so as far as the appointments go, we need to because Libby was looking for feedback from us on what we
Oh,
thought.
she
if we
was?
had a
I didn't
preference.
know that.
Yeah, so should we be telling her then that it should just be up to her to fill them in whatever order she wants to put them in?
Would be first come, first serve in her, to
Yes.
make it easy.
Suggesting that the first people that she gets sworn in will do the 3. And when the 3-year terms are finished, the next people get the 2. And then the last one will get the 1, even though they'll probably get reappointed the following year anyway.
Yeah, I think there's only.
By the time she gets around to
it.
it, that one will be 2.
You're right. You're right.
I'm anticipating not getting sworn in until I arrive on the island at the end of June. And that will have made 1 year since I was first considered.
We'll have a party.
It shows you how efficient Nantucket government is. It is a good example.
It
Well, but
sounds
it's
like
been
you may
great
get,
fun to be with you.
you'll
Yeah, you're
get some action, sooner than the SGR issue will, be resolved hopefully by the working group.
STRs will become LTRs.
Yeah. Exactly.
Long-term rental.
By the way, I want to mention something to you that I heard, a little tidbit. An acquaintance of ours decided that he'd like to come up to Nantucket in the middle of the summer. He's a very, very successful businessman and has a business that people in Nantucket are interested in. And sometimes they have these events where he brings some of his people. And so he calls up the broker that he normally uses, and he wants a nice high-end rental for 2 weeks in either July or August. And guess what he's told?
They're sold out.
No, there's rentals, but they're only doing it for 30 days or more because they don't want to get caught into the short-term regulation permit rules. So
Huh.
no one's renting to him for 2 weeks.
That's
So
interesting.
is that a new phenomenon? We talked, Kathy, you remember early on, we talked about the fact that people doing short-term rentals would be bound by, provisions requiring, insurance, provisions requiring no violations, provisions requiring inspection, provisions, et cetera. And people renting for 30 days or more have none of those obligations. And suddenly people are starting to wake up to that fact, I think. I don't know if it'll change anything, but it's an interesting tidbit that we heard.
Well, it's also interesting that there's such the market is strong enough to allow for that. That's really quite amazing.
Yeah. In theory, it probably still is.
Yeah. But more importantly, Gary, how are you feeling? And you're looking well. How you doing?
It's hard to learn to walk when you're over 80 years old, but I go to therapy. I have therapy every single day, and I'm dealing with it. I'm not on my walker anymore most of the time. I'm on my cane.
Good.
And I can take a little walk around. Luckily, I'm still in Florida, so I don't have to worry about sleet or snow when I take a walk around my house. So I'm getting there.
We expect to see a very fancy cane when you show up in that second.
Yeah, I'll show you my cane right now. It's gold.
Okay, good.
My gold cane. And there's my walker behind me.
We see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, are those allowed if we ever meet again in person, are those weapons allowed in public meetings?
I don't expect in 4 more weeks to have to use a cane.
Oh,
Hopefully,
great.
if there is a God, if there is a God.
That's good.
We'll
And
see.
anyway, so you'll be ready for our formal dance this year, is that right?
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Oh, thank you. Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and that's very good. I think we set a Guinness Book of World Record for the longest meeting that I've attended, at least.
Stay safe, everybody, and don't fall.
Thank you, Bruce.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce and Gail.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And Gail.